Lila Buckley from IIED. I see two lines of argument developing through this morning and the second panel discussion. First is the notion of these pervasive forces of international finance and investment and the redefinitions of properties that require interrogation. And the second is also this vision of alternative practices and an alternative vision required for agriculture relating to agroecology and participatory titleship allocation. And I'd like to challenge or ask the panel and challenge us over the next couple of days to bring these two lines of thinking together. How can these forces discussed in the panel and the powers of exclusion in this framework, conceptual framework of understanding, bring us to a better understanding of where finance can come from for achieving this alternative vision?
Gavin Cabs, University of Cape Town. My comments actually are responses to my friend and comrade Sam Moyo on 2 points that Sam has raised, and they're both to do with the conceptual frameworks we adopt. Number one, I think Sam is absolutely right to point at the level of history, and particularly at the level of world economy when thinking about the processes going on now. We had this morning a list of the drivers of land grabs. We're familiar with those, and those processes are real and they're concrete and there's no doubt about them. But behind that are other processes which are no less real and concrete, but are operating on a different level of abstraction and are operating on a different historical level as well. And Sam has talked about crisis, and I think it's incredibly important. When we mention bubbles, for example, the possibility of a new land bubble, what is underlying that? I would argue it's a long-term crisis of profitability, which has been there in the system since the 1960s, what Robert Brenner has referred to as a long downturn, and which has manifested itself in a variety of different ways. The way in which land grabs are actually unfolding can't be reduced to that, but they are linked to that, and we need to work out the mediations and so forth. Also as well how that is expressed in the rise of new powers such as China, and the way in which they pursue economic competition for other means, including military means and military means of force. So, insofar as the concept of imperialism may include all of those things, I agree with Sam, this is absolutely critical. The second point now is at the level of the African economy. Sam has pointed to 3 phases of what he called accumulation by dispossession. I would say a better way of thinking about it in the examples that Sam gave of the peasant path in West Africa, the various forms of forced labour in South and Southern Africa, etc., is actually accumulation without dispossession. This is what links all of these different systems. It was the inability of colonial states to completely force people off the land, which led to forms of exploitation, which allowed capital accumulation to happen. And what is really interesting now, certainly in the Southern African perspective, but I think it also applies with our Ghanaian friends and many other places as well, is that the institutional legacy of these systems, which included forms of communal land tenure, which included forms of local state authority which were highly coercive and were concentrated in the chieftaincy. These were things themselves which were created in that earlier process to crystallise and to reproduce it over time and to stabilise it. And now as there's a new wave of capital moving into those areas, this is the institutional legacy that they're actually confronting. So it's not like some process of primitive accumulation which has finally caught up with Africa. That happened a long time ago. These are the forms which are the legacy of that, of an earlier phase. And now the various contradictions and some which are going on, that's what we need to research at that level.
Sofia Monsalve, I work for FIAN International, which is a human rights organization working for the right to food. I appreciate very much Sam's presentation and how he highlighted the importance of understanding the systemic logic behind land grabbing. Now, my question is of course related to what to do. In the discussions with financial activists, if I can call him like that, them like that, so what to do with financial capital, what to do with the speculation. The first thing they said to us is, forget about regulation, because investors always find a way to bypass regulation. So the way forward is to try to delink as much as possible from all these currents and flows. if I understand it also correctly, is because of the failures of the system for peasants, you just really have to build a very strong autonomy as peasant, and the link from all these changes, from all these ambiguous spaces of autonomy, recovering territories and protecting people. So now my question to you, because you mentioned it, or they dropped just a line on how to regulate capital. Do you think is policy space there to do something useful? Because we are looking for ideas why to push for on that level. Thank you.
Stella Correa from the University of East Anglia, now in the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Can you all hear me? Okay. Now my question is about how many ecologists are there in the audience? Can you raise your hands? 1, 2, 3. This relates to ecologists, like 3, 4.
How do you find an ecologist?
Someone who has studied ecology, for instance, as an undergrad. The question, why I'm asking this question is related to the Brazilian scholar this morning, and is how do we bring the ecology into our conceptual analysis of land grabs? It's a question for the panel, because I wonder, when we think about alternatives, I mean, those of you who work in oil palm plantations or soy, I mean, are these ecosystems can be reversed to sort of what we had before? Are there thresholds in the ecological systems? Have we thought about these issues? Because maybe there's no way back.
Hi, I'm Melanie Somerville. I'm at the University of British Columbia in Canada, so one of the PhDs that was mentioned. And I've been doing a little bit of work there on a large agricultural investment project which works with Aboriginal people, so First Nations people, which is a very marginalized population in Canada. It's not where people think of, though, when you talk about the land grab. And I'm interested how in international discussions about the land grab, we're focusing mostly on sort of imposed investments and imposed dispossession. And I'm just wondering about communities who willingly participate in these investment projects, which is the case in my case. I realize that, as you said, Tania, that there is no alternative can be used as a legitimation tactic, but I think there are cases where historical and contemporary marginalization processes really have left few alternatives. And I think a critical question maybe to be asking there is, how did it come to this? How did it come to those being the few alternatives that are left? So anyways, I mean, personally, I've really struggled with this term, the land grab, because using that language might exclude cases like mine. And at what cost, I guess. I don't think it's unique in the world, so. Thank you.
My name is Madeline, and Madeline Fairbairn, and I'm also a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I studied ecology as an undergrad, and it's not helping me at all figuring out the complexity of this. But this started out as a question for Sam, but actually really all of you touched on this a lot. I'm wondering if anyone can help me think about speculation, how to theorize speculation, and I was really wondering what you mean by speculative, because I was talking to Wendy about this earlier. I've been just realizing that dividing it up simply as productive or speculative investments is a very useful tool for people advocating these, because they can say, oh, this is a productive investment, it's going to feed the world. But for instance, in Brazil, most of the investments are going to be producing things because the land's expensive, but they might be expecting a big part of their profits to come from land appreciation, and they might already have an exit strategy. And so how are we thinking about this? Because I could really use help.
I'm Melissa Leach, based here at IDS. I want to pick up on Dianne's useful interventions about culture. As an anthropologist, I can't escape using culture, but I also have problems with it and find it hard to use it separately from power. And I'm very persuaded by the political economy analysis we've got here. But I think we don't want to lose sight of culture either. And that these ideas extend beyond the things that Dianne talked so beautifully about the rootedness of, as it were, local cultural values, meanings, symbolism of land, that kind of rootedness, towards thinking about the cultural dimension of what people are doing when they go for green grass and environment, how ideas about modernity and civilization and global goods and how businesses can appeal to their publics, and indeed the cultural dimensions of the lifestyles that are driving the food and energy consumption that is actually at the root of some of these drivers of land grabs. So this is kind of an appeal to keep a cultural political economy analysis going. And perhaps a question to Tania as to whether, when she talks about legitimation, that, as it were, covers that ground, or whether there's perhaps a little bit more to add to her very convincing analysis.
I picked up my hand in the morning also, did not get an opportunity. My name is Vidya Bhushan Rawat, and I'm from New Delhi, India, working with Social Development Foundation. One of the issues that legitimation, which is coming up, in India, every land is a state subject, and every state, there is a quota, what's called Chief Minister's quota. And the Chief Minister, if he is very happy with someone, can give this land to anyone. So that is happening. In fact, today there is a judgment by the Supreme Court which has taken back land given by a government in Madhya Pradesh, just in the name of a political leader. Now there are, India has won the World Cup, so we have given a lot of land to our sportspersons. So this is happening. And when Oliver presented the thing in the morning and his report, one of the things that I want to ask, maybe you might think it's not right in the commercial Western interest, but what about the land ceiling? Because this, when we are giving a huge tract of lands, it has made the land reforms redundant. We are creating new feudal laws, and land ceiling acts all over our country actually have become virtually nothing, redundant. So why not, if we want to save people from eviction and all these kind of things, there should be a land ceiling also on how much land can a company or an individual can own. And that was there in India, but that is now under the threat.
My question is to Tania. Sorry, I'm Kojo Amano from University of Ghana. And my question is on your conceptual scheme, where you characterize new investment as land as representing market failure, failure in the food system. Why do you see it as failure rather than market opportunity arising from neoliberal policies? And then if it is a market failure, then in the pre-existing system of food production, then how does land figure? How does land prefigure in that system then? So for instance, in the US in the 1950s, it began to expand into Central America. I remember in the 60s, what do I remember? But there was a lot of literature on TNCs, and a lot of them were agricultural TNCs moving into Central America. Why is that separate from that?
So we'll have about a minute or two for our panelists to respond to all of that. I know they're very upset with me. I'll hand you the microphone and you can just sit and then pass it to Sam.
Okay, I'll be very quick, but it's two to me. Melissa, yes, definitely. I mean, I think what makes legitimation effective is if it articulates, if it actually hooks on to a social group or social force or sentiment in the population. So, there are people who are, for various, who are positioned to be receptive to alternatives. There are also people who are very receptive to this idea that there really is a crisis and our government better do something to secure our food supply, etc. So, I mean, you could call those culture, but I think what you're pointing to is that legitimations aren't just kind of free-floating words. They only work to legitimate, or to be contested, in fact, to the extent that they hook on to what people are thinking, doing, worrying about, and so on. So that's kind of what I would call culture in that sense. I meant market failure only in the sense that if you actually looked at the time, 2007, 2008, the argument was the reason we actually have to get involved in why sovereign governments have to get involved in direct investment in farmland is because we can no longer just rely on buying rice on the global food market in the way we always have, right? So why did the Gulf states suddenly think they needed to produce food rather than just buy it, as they have done hitherto? So I think there was a sense that markets it wasn't just price, it was also availability. It was when Vietnam and so on started to say, we're going to stop exporting, that created a sense of crisis about actual food supply. Which was part of the legitimation of this. So I think it was just a particular moment in which there was a sense that you can't just buy food, you actually have to be involved in it. That was all I was trying to flag by that.
Thank you. Gosh, there are too many questions, but anyway, Gavin, yeah, I guess even in South Africa, where the dispossession was of land, in particular, was highest. It was still incomplete dispossession. It's not complete. So this, and this is very important to this argument. Sorry, I just jumped over that, because it created, more important than the fact that these chiefs are there to regulate these things we're talking about. It created a regulation of the labor system itself and a subsidy to capital to reproduce labor. You know, many of us were brought up by, we were educated through, not the state, but grandmothers brewing the beer and selling, you know, the whole reproduction system. And after retirement, people are thrown into those communities. So it has a function, it's a functional dualism. It's not a dualism that is separate. And even, so this systemic nature is also related to the fact that the neoliberal policies from the 80s, for Africa now, we're talking about 30 years. The continent hardly had 20 years of independence before it was neoliberalized. Okay, so you saw a total reversal of a growth that had the potential to do other things, at least to halt accumulation. Please, we're talking about African governments up to the 70s. There was a growth. There was some possibilities with many contradictions. So what we have is a situation which has increasingly enabled other forms of dispossession, which brings me to the Canadian example. Sorry, I studied there about 45 years ago. But yes, because this dispossession, especially for instance in situations where we then go and title land and so forth, and commodify land, and it becomes possible for people to want to sell their land because the real alternatives are very meager. For instance, how do you make grow peasant agriculture in South Africa and some of the other states, which is so unprotected from the world markets? The alternative is limited. The alternative is to protect. You have to regulate it. We cannot have a certain open door policy. On the continent. The continent is not going to revive Africa agriculturally and integrate into any kind of industrialization which is ecologically friendly or whichever way you want to define it, without a degree of protection. And we know that this is going to generate a major power struggle. You know, it's going to be a problem, a major conflict. So I'm saying that the dispossession, if you look at it in this longer term and frame, you see the roots of a continuous dispossession that can happen. So that even in communal areas, you have the few areas that are left, you have a greater differentiation and more people forced out into the peri-urban jobless emigration. So I think that, anyway, I mean, I'm sure the answer is not complete, but the point is that beyond policies like narrow policies like land series, you need major radical redistributive land reforms. And I think that which are not based on a private property allocation. So so
okay, 2 points. First one, I think ecology does help. It's the person in the back. You may find it comes back to bite you and it works well. I actually think that the recognition that material comes from somewhere. Material isn't just about money, with all due apologies to Marxists here. You know, it's about stuff, it's about minerals and water and sunlight and the ability to put those together and make organic matter. Right? Without that, we don't get real far. We have to feed ourselves and we have to feed others, even when they're exploited by people with love power. You know, somewhere they gotta get fed. I think that in answer to the person who stood up and said, well, what do we, you know, what's the alternative between critiquing the grab and looking at the finance, or talking about we need to have agroecology? And I think actually one way forward is to think in terms of matrix ecology, which John Vandermeer and Yvette Perfecto have just done a book on that, and it's really talking about that this isn't either or, and it's not that we're getting away from this thing where you say, hello, I'm green, give me 10% and do what you will with the rest. And then in 5 years, it's give me 12% and do what you will with the rest. And that instead, we really need to be thinking in terms of productive and consumptive and residential and extractive ecologies as such, right? And so I would say actually that integrating the study of ecology, taking into account power, networks, and territory is for me, really crucial to do. The other thing that I just wanted to come back to was also this idea of what you're saying, Sam, about people being pushed off land and so forth, and that it's something that you said, Tania, about frontiers, and that they're kind of gone. So our new situation, we don't have frontiers, but I'm seeing that some frontiers are disappearing, but we're getting new and fractal and recursive frontiers. And so the edges of cities are being colonized. For better or worse or both, you know, the sides of streams and rivers are being settled. There are new emergent ecologies all over the landscape. And a lot of places that previously were peripheries, when you're talking about peripheral states, right, and the states of settlement, there are suddenly new centers. They're being revalued by new criteria. And I think that also then we need to be able to countermap those criteria. We're going to, David Deng and others will be talking about free, prior, and informed consent and the sham that has become in so many places. But we need to talk, I think, about countermapping with good ecological and economic and social information what is coming at people in the way of demand and what is possible in their own future vision for the land, so that you have an alternative narrative. It isn't just no to this, take your money and go home, but you have new compelling narratives that are, you know, that are pictures, that are visions for the future in place that can stand up to some of this pressure.
Thank you. I want to thank our speakers one last time